Chris and Amy Zimba, missionaries in Zambia, do not have enough money to buy school supplies for the homeless children they're trying to lift out of poverty. They don't have enough money to afford quality kitchen utensils, and they endanger themselves every time they try and cook meals for these children. And the schools that they work with don't have enough money to afford medical tape. Now, think about the Vatican, the beauty, the architecture, and the incredible history. Imagine if the Catholic Church supported the Zimbas. Imagine the life-changing impact that they could have on so many different people. Not only could they afford all these things that would make their mission so much better, but they would be able to work with other cities and change the face of sub-Saharan Africa. But because of the division in the church, this incredible potential for good is hindered. This incredible potential for good that could change so many lives and bring about the kingdom of God is hindered because of the brides of Christ. 1 Corinthians 1:10 is my theme verse. I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you would agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. I chose this verse because it perfectly exemplifies what church unity is. But when was the last time you heard one of your pastors talk about this? When was the last time your church reached out to another church to bring them in? Church unity is one of the most common themes in the Bible. So that's why I also chose these verses. And these. And these. And these barely scratch the surface of the biblical support for church unity, and yet we constantly ignore it for our own pride and our own comfort. My personal objectives were, first off, to understand the nature of the divide between the churches, and second, to help fix that divide. And third, I wanted to leave a legacy not just in the church, but in myself as well. And these are the bubbles that Bob gave me to help me achieve these goals. I was to read 2 books, watch 2 documentaries, watch a video series, conduct 6 interviews, and read 7 articles. I was supposed to write 8 different papers on the divisions between the Catholic and Protestant churches. I was supposed to read the entire Bible, and I was supposed to create a Bible program for the whole school to read through the Bible in 4 years. I also hosted talks between different denominations about theology. Now, I knew going into this project that the subject material was going to be very, very sensitive, so I conducted a ton of research. The documentaries that I watched, Liberating a Continent by Pope John Paul II and the Fall of Communism, and Martin Luther, The Idea That Changed the World, gave me a fantastic basis to grow the rest of my research from. These were completed in early June. The video series, Pope, the Most Powerful Man in History by CNN, was completed the very first day that I got my bubbles. It showed me the complete and terrible things that can come when we let authority run rampant and when they can't be held accountable by the people that are under them. I read 2 books. Rome, Sweet Home is the testimony of a Catholic and of 2 Protestants who, through an honest investigation of the evidence, ended up in the Catholic Church. This was very important to my project because it countered my own testimony of leaving the Catholic Church, because that's where I saw the evidence going. Changing Churches is one of the central pieces of research to my project. It's an interdenominational discussion between Catholics and the Orthodoxy with the added perspective of a Lutheran. And in all, I read 38 different articles to get a very different and varied perspective on the subjects that I would be writing about. In all, I conducted 10 interviews. I only have 9 listed because one I completed last Thursday, and I'll get into that later. But first, Reverend Dr. Anthony Rover. He's one of the co-authors of Changing Churches. He was my mentor. He's taught at many prestigious universities and received his PhD from Brown. He was an incredible resource. Dr. Mickey Maddox was the other co-author of Changing Churches. He's a professor of historical theology at Marquette and also appeared on Martin Luther, The Idea That Changed the World, one of the documentaries I saw. Dr. Reza Aslan is a Muslim apologist. He has no affiliation with the church, but my interview with him was invaluable in my learning stretch. He has appeared on many, many different news stations as an expert and wrote the New York Times best-selling book, Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus Christ. I also interviewed Mark Van Oos, Reverend Brian Spang, and Dr. Andrew Sickery. All of them were fantastic resources. Pastor Jonathan Weibel, David Ginhart, and Reverend Alexander Cadman, all incredible resources. And I'm currently working with Deacon Alexander Cadman and with Dan Knoll, the man I interviewed on Thursday, to bring Holy Trinity Orthodox Church into a group of evangelical churches. While it's not specifically for evangelical churches, there has only ever been Protestant churches in this group. So this would be the first time in history that something like this had happened. And I intend to continue working on that as soon as all three of us can get together. I was supposed to write 8 different papers on the intercession of Mary and the saints, canon and the Maccabees, purgatory, indulgences, the rosary, clergy and the structure of the church, confession and the sacraments. One of the most interesting papers that I wrote was on the canon and the Maccabees, because while I went into it hoping to prove one side wrong and the other side right, I ended up realizing that it doesn't matter. That the traditional doctrines that are defended through the Maccabees and through the Deuterocanon are easily defensible through a canon that all the churches agree upon. I was originally supposed to conduct a PFL. Myself, Mrs. Moyer, and Bob all came to the consensus one meeting that having a Catholic come into the school and speak about theology for 2.5 hours on a Friday afternoon was probably not the best use of anyone's time. But I saw an opportunity with Jake Canizero taking a class for his traditionalist seminar. He was going to take a class to a Catholic Mass, and I thought that it would be important for people to know what they were going into. It would be important for them to know the reverence that Catholics hold for the Mass and the nature of the body and blood of Jesus Christ. What I wish I would have done differently about this was I only allotted for 5 minutes of time for question and answers. But the questions that our students asked were so deep and so profound that they led to an extraordinary theological discussion between our own Jake Canizero and Dr. Sickery for an hour after school on Friday. Now, I could never do a project about finding true Christianity without reading through the whole Bible. This was the most personally beneficial part of my project. It got me through so many tough times that I experienced, and without this as a bubble, I am very certain that I would not have had the strength to actually complete this project. I wrote up a summary of each and every book of the Bible, which is available both in my portfolio and on the website. Second off was a reading plan that I did with Zac Sechler. He spoke to you about that yesterday. In short, it was a Bible reading plan that we did through the Bible app. And yeah, I was also supposed to conduct a survey of believers and non-believers within the school and how they reacted to this. I can say that no one had a negative experience. No one who actually read the Bible had a negative experience. A few people didn't get anything out of it, but nearly everyone who read the Bible, both atheists and Christians, said that they saw improvements in their lives. Abby Galliano had this to say: "Now, to be honest with you, there are a lot of things that are happening in my life that are making me ridiculously in love with God. I seriously think this has a huge thing to do with it." Now, Church and Chicken is a bubble that I got in December. There was very little outward focus into my project, and Bob, Mrs. Moyer, and Mr. Jones came to me with this problem they saw, and they gave me this idea to host a theological discussion between denominations. In the beginning of these, I learned that there needed to be structure. I went into them hoping that people would know what they were talking about and that people would just follow along with the schedule just as I saw. But this obviously did not happen. I brought these concerns to Bob, and he suggested that I get both an itinerary and a leader for each meeting, which I was really hoping to implement in the third week. But a snowstorm dropped 8 inches of snow on our heads in a night, and I had to cancel. Weeks 4 through 6 were the best part of this whole event. I wanted to capitalize on the momentum that we had from having so many people in the first couple meetings. We talked about very, very deep topics like Calvinism and Arminianism and transubstantiation, and you'll hear about that later. Here's a couple pictures of us all. Week 7 and 8, as I'm trying to wind this down, I was supposed to conduct 8 of these meetings. I only got 7 because of the aforementioned cancellation. Week 7, we talked about how to deal with the abuse scandals. And this is the only one that I'm going to discuss the result that we came to as a group, because it was just so profound. Mrs. Lay, she had the observation that so many of the sins that we see coming from the people that we put in leadership, the abuse scandals, and all of this stuff, they're not coming from legal problems, which we scan our priests for. Rather, they're coming from emotional damage. And we need to be screening our priests for this emotional damage and helping them to get themselves together, rather than putting them in positions to abuse other people. And this was an incredible insight that I saw, and I couldn't just leave it in my papers. I had to share it with you all. Week 8, I knew that there were going to be a ton of absentees. All the people who would have traditionally defended the Apocrypha, which is the subject we were talking about, were not there, and they let me know beforehand. So I prepared. I reached out to many different Catholic organizations on campus to no avail. So I decided to be able to defend the Apocrypha myself. And I was ready for that. I had all my resources. But what I did not foresee was Dr. Greg Shearer coming to the same conclusion that I did about the Apocrypha, that there was no point in arguing it because all the doctrines could be easily explained through the traditional books. This is what Dr. Greg Shearer had to say about the entire Church and Chicken event. Your church and chicken activity was very engaging and enjoyable. We talked about so many subjects which have animated Christian thought for millennia. I was impressed with your research and preparation in identifying the important issues, and particularly so by your efforts to bring multiple viewpoints to the table. Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Baptists, and Charismatics all together at one table. Among the most enjoyable tidbits were learning how Catholics derive their understanding of transubstantiation and how the Orthodox soteriology is surprisingly close to Protestant partaker doctrine. And discovering that some people actually enjoy boneless chicken wings. Thank you for making sharing our viewpoints a fun and engaging activity. And this is what Deacon Alexander Cadman had to say about our meeting we did about Calvinism and Arminianism. Keep in mind, this is only a small portion of the total that he had to say. Thinking back on it, it's hard to believe we were able to talk about these profound notions in an hour, while eating chicken wings as well. This happened through the grace of God and the willingness of God to foster an environment for him to work in and through us. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this life-changing senior project. Now, this was by far and away the most fun part of my project, and I'm very grateful that Zac Sechler gave me the opportunity to join this with him. He went over the statistics yesterday, but I'll briefly go over them as well. Right now, we have about 13,000 views. Last time I checked, it was 2,995, or 12,995. We have 6,400 followers on Twitter and over 500 likes on Facebook. 500 likes and follows on Facebook. We're about to be featured on the Bible's Dingers podcast. They're driving up on April 20th to feature me and Zach on their podcast. And this is going to be an incredible opportunity for the both of us. We were invited to the Creation Club, which is an apologetics group started by David Reeves, a well-known evangelist. And last Friday, you may have heard me on Rev FM from 3 to 6, where I went to have an interview with Eric Lane. And currently, we have an open invitation to come back whenever we want. In the future, we hope to work with Ratio Christi, the largest campus apologetics group in the nation. We're both attending Liberty, where we will hone our skills in apologetics, and I hope to bring my project into this even more. And bring these skills into the idea of church unity, showing people that it really is an important part of Christianity. Right now, the last major media that we have yet to have our break in is YouTube. Now, at the end of senior projects, I fully intend to invest a ton of my time into this and to really make an impact on that scene. Zac Sechler briefly talked about the brackets that he started yesterday, and these have seen incredible, incredible results. We started a second Twitter account that already has hundreds of followers for these apologetics brackets. What I learned from this was that Christians are sheltered. In reaching out to different pastors to advertise Church and Chicken, some pastors told me that they did not want their people coming, that they would rather keep their people away from other Christians than encourage fellowship between denominations. And learning to deal with this was an incredible cause of anxiety for me. Not just for my project because people wouldn't come to Church and Chicken, but for Christianity as a whole. As if we refuse to acknowledge and refuse to see other people's points of view, we're just going to be engaged in a thought bubble and no good will ever come of it. I also learned the benefits of not procrastinating. This is the first major project in my life that I have not procrastinated, and I saw the benefits of it. I've always known that procrastination was a bad thing, but I've never actually implemented that idea until this year, and it was incredible. I gained an incredible respect for teachers through trying to create my own lesson plans for Church and Chicken. I learned the incredible effort that they put into their lesson plans each and every single day. I also learned that no meaningful change happened without God. I set out many times to do things on my own without Him. I made decisions without praying, and I went long stretches of time without reading the Bible, and these never came to anything. Everything that I did after praying, and I did with Him. One of the biggest parts of my learning stretch was learning to ask for help. In my research, what I could get done in a 15-minute interview with some of the people I mentioned took me 4 or 5 hours of reading. I decided to organize Church and Chicken myself without asking for the advice of people who had done this far more than me. If I had asked for help, not only would it have gone smoother in the first 2 weeks, but we would have had far more momentum to build on in the coming weeks. Also, paying for Church and Chicken. I advertised that there would be free chicken there to get people to come. This ended up being quite expensive, and I wish that I would have asked for people to help pay for it earlier. Through the last 2 weeks, people actually contributed and they supported that endeavor, but before that, it fell entirely on me. And I just want to take this time to apologize to Miss Moyer, Mr. Jones, and my family for the stress that I put them through while I was trying to learn this last part of my learning stretch. The idea that missed communication is miscommunication. I put my family through so much stress because I couldn't communicate what I was doing with my advisor, Miss Moyer, and Bob. And because of this, there were so many problems that could have easily been avoided. And for that, I'm very sorry. I want to quickly thank God first, my mom and dad, for being constant emotional supports and keeping me on track. I want to thank you to the Reverend Dr. Anthony Rover for being my mentor and an incredible help in this project. I want to thank Zac Sechler for giving me the opportunity to join it here in apologetics. I want to thank Dr. Sikri, Coach David Ginhart, Deacon Cadman, Dr. Greg Shearer, and Mark Van Oos for being incredible resources throughout this project. I want to single out Dr. Greg Shearer and Deacon Cadman for the incredible insights that they provided during Church and Chicken and the amazing leaders that they were during that. I want to thank Mr. Jones, my advisor, Mrs. Moyer for keeping me on track, and Bob for giving me this opportunity. And I just wanted to conclude with the idea that if the church wants to be the most effective that it can, if the church wants to be the best tool it can be against the enemies of God, we have to be unified. A hammer can't pull a nail with a broken handle, and a knife can't cut anything with a broken blade. The church can only do so much while we're separated, but through hard work and humility, we can be united, and we can be the best tool we can be for God. Thank you.
Nice job, Carl. You look very good.
Thank you.
Very well spoken. I was particularly impressed with your professional contacts. Really seemed like you had a variance of people there that I don't know if you knew any of them before, but to reach out and make contact with them, that was pretty cool. I got to be a part of several of the Church and Chicken events, and I'm glad that you quoted my wife because she's a very wise person, and she doesn't always get the credit that she deserves, so that was good. And she really enjoyed the time that she got to be there as well. And I was pleased to see Deacon Cadman at who we had become acquainted at those. And I guess one of the things that I want to kind of challenge you with as you continue to move forward, and I know you said you plan to expand and try and get on YouTube. I think one of the key things that you did, and whether you realize you were doing it or not, with the Church and Chicken is that you facilitated community. You brought together people, and so in all the media hype and trying to get likes and followers and interest, don't forget about the key piece of just basic human community. There's nothing like seeing someone again and being able to acquaint and say, hey, how are you doing? And so I would just challenge you with that as you get wrapped up in that, because I think that's a really key thing that really happened with Church and Chicken. I don't know if that was the intent. I know you had intent to cover issues, et cetera, but I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, but go ahead.
And that's something that I've seen happen through Adherent Apologetics, through the Twitter. We have an incredible community around us, not just of people that we know, but of people that we have never met before, but that are constantly commenting on our posts and constantly replying to our tweets. We really do have a fantastic community in that.
Good. Speaking of Adherent Apologetics, I've enjoyed following that and reading what you and Zac are writing about and some of the challenges you have with people who comment and some of the negativity that's out there. And that'll be a great learning stretch continued as you navigate those waters. Just one question for you, and maybe you addressed this a little bit in the beginning, but why this topic, and what do you feel, if anything, has changed about you?
Well, I was raised Catholic, and I became a Protestant after actually studying the Bible and what it is Catholics believe. I realized that I didn't agree with a majority of it. So through this project, I kind of reversed a little bit. Not only did I see that my own logic had some faults in it, in changing to the Protestant side, but I saw that the Catholics have far more evidence than Protestants tend to give them credit for. That was one of the main things that changed, and I did this project because I wanted to know what it was I believed. I wanted to have a solid basis in truth before I go on to the next part of my life.
All right, Carl, really good job. You're a really great communicator. You just come across really well when you're speaking. I think that's really good. You were very well prepared today. I thought that your biblical basis was really strong because you did read the Bible yourself. So I think that was a real good foundation for you, just personally. I was happy to see you do that. The research you did was interesting. As I was reading your binder, I started reading about the documentary that you watched about the Pope, and I thought, wow, I'd kind of like to watch that documentary. It just sounds that, you got a lot out of your research. Mm-hmm. So that was very cool. Your mentor was an impressive resource. Again, looking at your binder, I saw that he had emailed you back and forth about a lot of different things. So how did you find that mentor?
I found the book Changing Churches, and it was interesting to me, and I reached out to him, and I reached out to Dr. Mickey Maddox for an interview as well, and he agreed.
Okay, well, that was a really great opportunity for you, right? So I guess that was really also good of you to just reach out to somebody, because a lot of people don't even have the confidence to do that. So that was really good. I think that your church and chicken events were good too, because they got a group of people together who normally just wouldn't naturally be together talking about these type of topics. And so other than your project, I'm not sure that ever would have happened. So I really do have to give you a lot of credit for that. And I liked your quote, "Missed communication is miscommunication." Yeah, we just talked about that the other day, actually, in English class. So I really like that quote. I would just say that was a challenge for you over this year. Just communicating with me so that I knew what you were doing. And at times, this is what I would challenge you with. Also, when somebody is telling you something, make sure you step back and take the time to listen to what they're saying too. It has to be both ways. You take the time to communicate what you're doing, and then also take that time to listen to what the other person is telling you or advising you. And I think if you can just learn that as a lesson in your life, you've got so much talent, and you're going to go really, really far. So I think it was a good project. What was the most challenging thing for you?
Communicating.
Okay.
Absolutely, it was communicating.
Yeah.
And you touched on it, and that was something that I actually really wanted someone to ask me about, because I don't listen very well. You hear laughs from my parents. I don't listen to other people very well. I tend to get lost in my own thought, and that's something that I've really seen myself work on throughout this year. Maybe not the results that I would have hoped for, but there's definitely been some results, and I really do hope that continues.
All right. Well, thanks, Carl.
Good job, Carl. This has been a journey for you. It has been, and I glad to get to be a part of it. I am absolutely impressed that you got through the whole Bible this year. That's not an easy feat. I don't think a lot of people, anyone that's done it, knows what you've accomplished. And there's a lot of people out here who have never done that. Half the school do it in 4 years, and you did it in 1, with all your other work plus this, And so that's impressive, and hats off for me for that. I do kind of think it's funny that you landed on the Apocrypha for the word and not the Deuterocanon. I can never say the word. That word.
Yes.
Because
Deuterocanon.
Deuterocanon. Every time I read that, I think I said it differently out loud. Because, Apocrypha meaning like it doesn't work, and Deuterocanon was the part of it. I love that paper. It was a really good paper, and I enjoyed reading that. Between you and Zach, I feel like I've read like 18 theological textbooks this year. I am now getting back to my novels. All right, I'm just saying, it's going to be crime novels for a few days. But some really interesting things that I learned about this was interesting for me on a personal level, because one of the things that you wrote about, my son asked me not even a month later. He's like, what happened? Why do the Catholics think this about Mary? And I'm like, oh, I know, because Carl just did this. And so you did a good job with those. And it's so funny, you talk about not procrastinating. And I think Mrs. Moore hit on this a little too. The listening thing was definitely an issue, because you were distracted by your ideas. And I see that. I could see that. You would come in with some of the craziest ideas. You really would. I'd be like, I don't think that's a good idea. And it took a while to get you down there. And I think I did notice a development in your listening skills by the end, so I don't want you to be completely discouraged. I noticed that there were times I'd say, I think you should do this, and you did it. And you listened. But I know it was hard because you had great ideas in your head. And sometimes those great ideas worked out well, like the chicken and church. That's a great idea.
Wasn't my
but
idea.
You ran with it. You made it what it was. You took the idea and you made it that way. And that's a good thing. And the other times we're just like, you might want to dial that back. That might not work. I am really glad you did not do the Greek course, because I did not want to read anything about Greek again. All right? That's like 20 years, suppress that trauma. But one of the things I want to ask, a couple questions. What do you want to do with all of this knowledge now, other than the running the Twitter account and all that? Is there something for your life ahead of you, the things that you are going to do, you want to do, you feel God's calling you to do, that this plays into?
Throughout this project, I felt somewhat of a call to be a pastor. I'm still working that through, but I think that it is a very, very possible future for me, and this would give me a fantastic basis for that.
And one of the things, when we had the conversation with Zac Sechler, I remember thinking too, like, this is going to be interesting. And even the questions that were not asked to him, but the discussion of the students afterwards was quite interesting. So there was a part of me that wished we would have figured out a way to get it into the classroom. But I'm glad that you brought that in. You took the chance to bring somebody in to talk about something that I would say 80 to 90% of us had no clue, never had to think about. I really like that. I like that you're owning your miscommunications. I think that's, I love that. I love that you saw, hey, I could have done it better here. I think that was good. And I think that's a good learning lesson in this situation, is doing that. And finally, I think I love your conclusion, but there's a little part of me that's like, you should have switched it to bride there. Like, so that we're not just the brides anymore, but if we are the bride of Christ, we'll do better. It would have been really fun to play with that exchange. And I have really enjoyed the apologetics, adherent apologetics. I kind of came late to that just because I don't get on Twitter enough, and now I've been catching up, and my wife's like, your screen time's going up, and I'm like, yeah, well, you got to read why. But yeah, good presentation, and I know that times it got a little distracting, it got hard chasing down some of the big ideas, but when you really settled on it, you got it done, and good job.
All right, great job, Carl. You're a great presenter. I mean, a really terrific presenter, speaker. You have a lot of confidence up there. You're clear. You're articulate. I was really impressed with that. Lots of poise. I thought your professional contacts were great. You didn't hesitate to go after them, and that helps a lot, right?
Yes.
You get those early and often.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, what is the Holy Trinity Orthodox Church?
It's a church on Spark Street that Deacon Alexander, he heads up.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
Oh, okay, all right, sorry.
it's a congregation.
Let's see. I like the way you've worked through your research as in the presentation. You told us a little bit about it, but didn't get too deep into it because your time was of the essence. But you did a lot of research. I would just say, looking at these bubbles, just to clarify, I didn't ask you to read the whole Bible. You wanted to do that. I was amazed that you wanted to do that. So you came up with that, and that I hesitated about that because that's a huge undertaking, but you did it. And it's pretty amazing. Very few people have read through the whole Bible. So, and you also helped get the program started to read to everybody else reading through that. It's a huge legacy and something I wanted to do for a long time, but you guys got it done. So that's great. You also, for those that haven't seen his binder, which you haven't seen his binder, he wrote a summary of every, you mentioned this, but writing a summary of every book of the Bible is 66 summaries, and they were not one paragraph each, so that was a big job too. A lot of work here. Regarding church and chicken, I think that was awesome. And I think, I don't know, you pointed to me, I think come up with the idea of like talking, but that's all I did. I think I shouted that to you in the parking lot as we were leaving the parking lot or something. It was just a couple sentences, and you took that, and the next thing I knew, it was church and chicken. It was a great idea, a great concept, and that's a big accomplishment. That's a really good accomplishment to get people there, and I think that was really great. I'd like to see that keep going. Let's see here, what else we have. So one little critique here. I think one of the things that you've learned a lot of is to slow down, and they talked about listening already, and just kind of take wise counsel. The challenge with you will always be you have great ideas and big ideas, and you can actually pull them off in most cases. It's really hard when you're an idea person to be able to determine what ideas are good ideas and doable. I always tell people I have 100 ideas a day, maybe one good one, and I have no idea which one it is. And that's kind of going to be your challenge. And then to figure out, can you get, friends around you or people that you trust that can say, hey, this is good, this is grandiose, this is not, And that's going to be a challenge. And it's a good challenge. It's a good thing to have, the brain that you have. It's just a challenge. So sometimes, along with that, I'm the same way. You can get frustrated, and that can bleed over. And then that starts to have people, you want to keep people working with you. So like I read in your diary here, one of these things says Bob needs to learn how to delegate work, which is true. But when I read that, that's hard to read because I'm like, that doesn't help. But it is a personal journal. But that's the kind of thing that sometimes not let your frustration bleed out. I thought that I think, watching through those Pope videos and things like that was great. That was a lot of time. I watched those, and it's a lot of, there's no way to shortcut that. It's a lot of time, and I appreciate that. Can you explain your relationship with it here in apologetics? How do you and Zac work together on that? What's that like?
Well, Zac brought me on. He has most certainly done a majority of the work. He got it started and all that, and he brought me on later. I didn't know that much about apologetics at the time, so I've spent a great deal of the time that I've been working on that has actually been spent researching as well. But I've also brought my project in, and the papers that I wrote, most of them are up on that website as well. So right now we're split over the Twitter. He's done all the work for the YouTube channel. I'm exceedingly perfectionist when it comes to stuff like that, so that's something I need to work on when I do get into that. But I can most certainly say he has done a majority of the work for that.
How do you interact? Do you decide what's going to go on there, or?
I think we trust each other enough to not be heretics, honestly.
That's good.
And we both edit each other's papers before they go up.
Okay. And
just make sure that they're free of grammatical.
Well, I've been amazed by it because you guys really have a knack for it because it's very fascinating. That's not easy to do. One of the things I wrote here is one of the challenges of trying to be a unifier is not getting too frustrated with the dividers. Okay, so it's possible that, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to see what a Catholic would think of the presentation because in the beginning, the opening comments were pretty, it seemed negative towards Catholics, but that's kind of how I took it, but that's not where you ended up. And partially it's just because of, there has been a lot of scandals in the Catholic Church, but there have really been an equal number of scandals in the evangelical church. It just doesn't get the press because it's so divided. And in any big organization, denomination, or movement, there's going to be huge leadership scandals. And but the Catholic Church tends to be the ones that get a lot of press because of the way that the church works. So, you said here that pastors didn't really want their congregants to attend the church in Chicken. Is that something they said to you, or?
They said, and I quote, "I'm the only one of my congregation who I'd be comfortable attending."
Wow. Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yes.
Interesting. Huh. Did they attend?
No.
Okay, that's what I figured. Let's see. I love that you said Catholics have far more evidence than Protestants give them credit for. It's one of the reasons I love talking to Dr. Sechler, because every time I talk to him, I think, man, I just assume that, really it's with all denominations, and they're distinctive. You think, okay, I don't believe that. And then when you get with people that are godly people, you think, wow, they can believe even something different and still be godly. And I think that's one of the things it looks like you learn through this presentation. There's all kinds of different Catholics, all kinds of different evangelicals, all kinds of different Lutherans, and it's almost like it's all about godliness and holiness, isn't it? how humble they are in search of God that brings them together in unity, not just focusing on the distinctives, right? So tell me a little bit more about the church and chicken. How did that go? What did it look like? How did it start? In other words, so you meet at where? The Quaker Steak.
Yep.
After church, and then people came. Did they come on time? And you sat down.
Yeah.
You had to pick. Did you have a back room? How did it work?
Exactly like you said. People came, we sat down in the back room. On Sunday, they have a deal for 25 wings for $20, which is actually it's actually a great deal. So I ordered a couple of those for everyone, and we all sat down, talked about the topic. Everyone shared their opinion. We went around and people talked about their own personal testimony, not just their own personal testimonies, but their relationship with their churches they've been in the past, and just bared their heart about their what they've seen with their theology that they've had throughout their lives.
It looked like one of the testimonials there had talked about the way you organized it. Did you have like a structure? Did you just say, okay, we're going to talk about the Apocrypha today and go at it? Or did somebody make a presentation, or how did that work?
I just said we're going to talk about the Apocrypha today, and we went at it. I trusted the Holy Spirit to guide us through that, and it worked.
And was there tension? Was everybody nice to each other? I know Greg Shearer can be really problematic.
Oh, absolutely. He
didn't throw anything, did he, or anything like that? So he behaved.
I think there was about $500 worth of damages he got.
Oh, nice.
No, I'm joking. But there was one moment of tension while we were talking about transubstantiation. It started to get a little bit more heated because we were just going around in circles. Someone would provide their evidence. Someone else would just provide their evidence, and they were just going around in circles saying the same thing. Tension started to build, and Deacon Cadman actually did a fantastic job of recognizing that and handling it, and dispersing that heat.
Interesting. Did any of your views change? Specific theological views? Or tell me which ones, do any of them morph into something different? Did any of them completely change? How do you feel about that?
My own personal views have remained relatively consistent, but what I believe about others' views has changed greatly. I began this project thinking purgatory was entirely unbiblical. Through researching it and all this stuff, actually that's the one that I was pretty set on, was still completely unbiblical. But the Maccabees, that was something that I changed. Intercession of Mary and the Saints was a big one. I thought that there was no possible way you could defend this, but through researching it and seeing all that, I realized that if your conscience is really clear and God doesn't convict you at all of it, I really don't think there's any way to condemn that through an entirely biblical understanding. There is a great deal of evidence for it.
And that's what I love about the project, Carl. That's a big step for anybody. There's very few people that have moderation, that can actually look at somebody's belief and think, I disagree with you, but I respect you, even in a spiritual way. It's one thing to respect somebody's political views, but to respect them in a godliness and a holiness way, even though you disagree with their views, I think is a giant step forward and a very rare skill. And if you can keep that and keep developing that, it'll be an amazing ability to bring people together, because very, very few people can do that. All right. Well, I love this project. Oh, one more thing. So I'm very fascinated with the project. It's another project that I wanted to get done, and you guys did the work for it. So you interviewed the imam? Is it imam? Or Muslim representative?
Okay, so I'll go into this. In my original bubbles, I wanted to do a Muslim and Christianity distinctive, what's different and what's similar about the two religions. And so I went into this project, and I interviewed Dr. Reza Aslan, who I mentioned earlier, and I interviewed Imam Meir Fellenbaum, who Zach also interviewed. And which are you referring to?
Either one.
Okay. Dr. Reza Aslan, actually I mentioned him. I mentioned him. Actually, I'll get into Fellenbaum. He was I interviewed him twice about his beliefs. A primary interview and a follow-up about the primary interview. And I mentioned an incredible crisis of faith that I had in my journal, and he was actually the main cause of that. I felt, this is something that I shared during 242, and I guess I'll share it here as well, why not? But I was thoroughly considering converting to Islam for a couple days in October. And the community that I found in 242 and all that stuff really saved my faith, along with reading the Bible. It was an incredibly beneficial experience in the end.
Interesting. All right. Well, I love what you did. It took a ton of work. You persevered through it, and I saw a lot of growth. And great job, Carl.
Thank
Really
you.
terrific job.
Thank
you for your hard work.
Thank you. Here, there it is. For the pictures. Yep.
Great work.
What?
Great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there's a chance we have for the Oelhafs and Reverend here maybe to say something. Would you like to say something to Carl? Just comment on this project.
I just wanted to give you congratulations and thank you for the opportunity to participate. It was, I think you were correct about the church in Chicken, about the opportunity to get people together and listen and have an opportunity to evaluate what everyone's saying. Because people, the comment he was talking about in the transubstantiation discussion, both sides were saying essentially true things, but they weren't listening to each other. And I remember going aside to Carl and say, "Look, listen, they're saying the exact same thing, but because they were trying to present their viewpoint and not listen to the other person, they weren't coming to that understanding." So yeah, I think you're learning a lot about communications, learning about listening, and that's the best way. If you want to be heard, listen first. So, absolutely.
Thank you for coming today and participating. It's fantastic. So, all right, Oelhafs, we are here.
Good job, Carl. You put a lot of work into this, and it showed.
Thank you, Carl. Hey, you're amazing. I got to say, when I got wind of this project, I thought it was really doubtful, and it made that quite clear to many people. And it was probably a very large source of headwind for you. I told you this should be a negative study because when I think about Christianity, I think about prideful leaders, and I think that schisms are simply Christianity embodied. And I should read David and Goliath some more because you're David, man. You pulled it off. I don't get it. I still don't understand what happened.
Well, they don't just pop out like that. You guys developed a great student there, and I'm really, really proud of you, Carl. So great job.
Thank you.